A year after our divorce, my ex texted me, "We need to talk." Now, I replied, "Busy. Date night with your best friend." 24 hours later, I found out her new guy had been arrested, and somehow my name was all over the case. Sup, Reddit. My name's Nolan. I'm 36, male, and you're going to want some popcorn for this one, because this story gets really messy. The text came through on a Saturday while I was parked outside a Vietnamese restaurant, waiting for Sloan to come back with our order. It was a new number, but I knew who it was immediately. Ava had always had a certain way of reaching out whenever she wanted something. Everything was urgent. Everything was dramatic. And somehow everything was always about her. The message was simple. "I need to talk today. It's important." It had been 1 year and 3 months since the divorce papers were finalized. 15 months of complete silence. And now, out of nowhere, she needed to talk. I typed my response without even thinking about it. "Busy. Date night with your best friend." Her reaction came in waves. First, the typing indicator appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. It happened at least 6 times. A few seconds later, my phone absolutely exploded. 12 messages in 90 seconds. There were words like betrayal, disgusting, and "you two deserve each other." Then came a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. After that, silence. A minute later, Sloan climbed back into my truck carrying a bag of spring rolls and takeout containers. She glanced at my phone, which was still lighting up with notifications, then raised an eyebrow. "Ava finally figured it out," she said. "Took her long enough. You good. Never better." And I meant it. 24 hours later, I found out exactly why Ava had been so desperate to reach me. Finding out that Sloan and I were together had sent her into a complete meltdown. But to understand why, I need to take you back to the beginning. Back to a Thursday night in October, when I came home from work and found my wife surrounded by matching luggage like she was putting on an entire performance, and I was the only person in the audience. It was 6:15 on a Thursday evening. I pulled into my driveway after spending 12 straight hours crawling through commercial ductwork. One of my guys had called in sick that morning, and a restaurant client was threatening to cancel their service contract if we couldn't get their walk-in cooler running before the dinner rush. By the time I got home, my knees were absolutely wrecked. I run a commercial HVAC company, Nolan Commercial HVAC, 12 employees, more than 40 active service contracts, and apparently, one wife who had been planning her exit for months without saying a word to me. The house was dark when I walked inside. No TV, no smell of dinner, no music, nothing except the steady ticking of the grandfather clock her mother had given us as a wedding gift 7 years earlier. I found Ava in our bedroom. She was surrounded by luggage. 3 matching pieces in some seafoam color she'd picked out. She was emptying her side of the closet with the kind of focus you see in someone who had rehearsed the entire scene in her head 100 times. She didn't even look up when I walked in. She just kept folding a silk blouse as if I wasn't standing there. "Taking a trip?" I asked. "Taking my life back," she said. Then she finally looked at me. "I want a divorce." I leaned against the doorframe because my legs were already done for the day, and I wasn't about to give her whatever emotional reaction she was expecting. "You're leaving me on a Thursday?" I looked at the luggage. "Couldn't even wait until the weekend?" She finally looked up properly. There was an expression on her face I'd never seen before. It was almost like she was already looking at a stranger, someone she was trying to erase from her life. "This isn't a joke, Nolan." "I know. Jokes are usually funny." I nodded toward the luggage surrounding her. "That's a lot of bags for someone who told me 2 weeks ago that she was happy." Her jaw tightened. "I've been unhappy for years." She folded her arms. "You just never noticed because you're always covered in grease and obsessing over compressor specs and quarterly numbers." I stared at her. "Those compressors paid for your Pilates membership." I gestured toward the luggage. "They paid for that luggage you're packing, the car sitting in the driveway, and the house we're standing in." Her expression immediately hardened. "See? This is exactly what I'm talking about." She smoothed her hair back. Ava always did that whenever she was about to say something she'd probably rehearsed in the shower. You make everything about money. You have zero emotional depth. You don't know how to actually connect with someone." She shook her head. "I've outgrown this marriage, Nolan." Then she looked straight at me. "I've outgrown you." I took a breath. "Is there someone else?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence told me everything. "Who is it?" "It doesn't matter who. It matters to me." I stared at her. 8 years together. I think I've earned a name. She grabbed the handle of her largest suitcase and started rolling it toward the bedroom door. I didn't move. She stopped about 3 feet away from me and lifted her chin. It was the same defiant pose she'd always used whenever we fought. "His name is Ian." She paused. "Ian Whitmore." Then she added quickly, "And before you start spiraling, he's not why I'm leaving." She tightened her grip on the suitcase. "He's just where I'm going." Ian Whitmore. I knew that name. He was a commercial real estate guy with billboards all over the county. The kind of guy who wore expensive suits and posted motivational garbage on social media like he'd personally invented the concept of hard work. I dealt with him before. The previous year, he'd tried to lowball me on servicing one of his office buildings. He wanted me to fix his AC unit in exchange for a testimonial on his company website. Apparently, in Ian Whitmore's world, an online review was worth more than actual labor. "Ian Whitmore," I repeated. "The guy who tried to pay me with exposure for HVAC work. He's a successful businessman." I almost laughed. He tried to get a busted condenser fixed for free. He wanted me to accept a quote on his website as payment for actual labor. That's not business. That's delusion with a marketing budget. "You're missing the point." "No, I'm getting the point just fine." I stepped aside so she could wheel her luggage through. She stared at me like I just said something completely insane. She'd expected a fight. Maybe tears. Maybe me begging her to stay. Instead, all she got was logistics. "You're not even going to fight for me?" I looked at her. Why would I? Then I turned and headed upstairs toward the guest room. Behind me, I heard her make a strange little sound. Part frustration, part disbelief. I slept in the guest room that night. Or at least, I lay there in the dark staring at the ceiling. I couldn't shut my brain off. I was doing math. How much was the business worth? How much would I need to rebuild? How many new contracts would I have to land to make up for her being gone? What would the next 5 years of my life look like without her? While Ava probably expected me to fall apart, I was already planning. The next morning, I drove to the shop before sunrise. Nolan Cole Commercial HVAC operated out of a converted warehouse in the industrial district. 16,000 square feet of organized chaos. 8 service vans lined up outside, and a reputation for actually showing up when we said we would. In this business, that was rarer than you'd think. My shop foreman, Hector, was already there when I pulled in. He'd been with me since year 2, back when the company was basically just me, a used van, and blind optimism that was bordering on stupid. Hector was built like a fire hydrant. He took one look at my face, then slowly set his coffee down. "You look like someone kicked your dog, stole your truck, and talked trash about your mom all at once." Ava left. He didn't flinch. He just nodded, almost like I'd finally confirmed something he'd suspected for years. "About time." I stared at him. "You're not surprised?" "Boss, I've been married 31 years. I know what a happy wife looks like." He shook his head. "That woman hasn't smiled at you since we were still using our 22 refrigerant." He handed me a clipboard with the day's work orders. "You want to talk about it?" "I want to work." Good answer. I threw myself into the day like my sanity depended on it. I fixed equipment, ran inventory, made calls to vendors who were getting increasingly antsy about payment terms. The business wasn't exactly struggling, but it wasn't killing it either. We broke even most months, pulled ahead on the good ones, dipped into reserves on the bad ones. It was the kind of financial balancing act that could keep you awake at night if you thought about it too much. Around 11, I got a call from Donovan Briggs. Donnie ran 3 car dealerships across the county and had been my biggest client for 4 years straight. Steady work, reliable payments, always paid within 30 days. Nolan, we got to talk, he said. His voice had that particular tone people use when they're about to deliver bad news but feel guilty about it. What's going on, Donnie? I got approached by another outfit yesterday. Whitmore Commercial Services. My stomach tightened. They're offering to undercut your rate by 15% and lock me into a 2-year contract. Full maintenance package, emergency response guarantee, the whole thing. He paused. They had a whole presentation. My stomach dropped. Whitmore Commercial Services? Yeah. You know them. I knew them now. Ian Whitmore. The guy who was currently unpacking my wife's luggage at whatever overpriced condo he lived in. He wasn't just taking my wife. He was coming for my business, too. Did their sales guy happen to mention how they got your contact information, Donnie? Now that you mention it. Yeah. He sounded thoughtful. Said they'd been referred by a mutual connection. Someone who knew our service history and maintenance schedule? Yeah. Someone who thought we'd be a good fit for their premium package. I figured it was just sales talk. It wasn't sales talk. It was my wife selling me out one client at a time. Donnie, I've serviced your dealerships for 4 years. I've never missed a call. Never left you hanging on a weekend. Never blamed supply chain issues for slow response times. I know, Nolan. That's why I'm calling you first. He sighed. But 15% is 15%. I've got shareholders to answer to. I've got a board that goes over every expense line every quarter. I rubbed my forehead. Give me a week. Let me put together a counteroffer. Something that makes sense for both of us. You've got until Friday. He paused. But I need something real, Nolan. Not just promises and handshakes. I hung up and sat there for a moment. Someone was making targeted moves against my clients. And they were using information they shouldn't have had. There was only one person who could have given Ian access to that kind of information. Eva. She was obviously part of it. A few minutes later, Hector appeared in the doorway. Bad news. I looked up. Whitmore Commercial Services just tried to poach Donnie. Whitmore? Hector frowned. That's the real estate guy, right? The one with the billboards everywhere? Same guy. I paused. He's also the one my wife left me for. Hector went quiet for a second. Then he looked at me. So, you want me to accidentally drop a toolbox on his car sometime? He shrugged. I know a guy who knows where he parks. I almost smiled. Tempting, but no. I stood up from my desk. I want to know how he got Donnie's contact information. I looked toward the office window. And I want to know what else he's been doing while I wasn't paying attention. I got my answer 3 days later. And it was worse than anything I'd expected. Ava had been forwarding my client list to Ian for months. I found out because my accountant, Ruth, noticed something strange while reconciling our quarterly invoices. Ruth was one of those ridiculously detail-oriented people who noticed everything. She'd been doing my books since year 1. If a number was off by 10 cents, she'd find it. That afternoon, she slid a printout across her desk toward me. Someone accessed your CRM system 17 times in the past 60 days. I looked at her. From where? An IP address that doesn't match your office, your home, or any of your other devices. She tapped the paper. And the login credentials used were your wife's. I stared at the printout. The credentials I gave her 2 years ago? Those exact ones. I'd given Ava access back when she was helping with billing during busy season. I picked up the pages. There were dates, times, files accessed, client contact information, contract renewal dates, service histories, pricing structures, vendor relationships, everything a competitor would need to systematically poach my entire customer roster. She was feeding him my business, I said. Ruth nodded. Systematically, over at least 5 months. I looked back at the pages. 5 months. She'd been doing this while sleeping next to me, while telling me she loved me, and apparently there was more. Ruth pulled another document from the folder. She had the expression of someone who was about to deliver another gut punch. And there's something else. What? 3 weeks ago, someone applied for a business credit line in your company's name. She placed the application in front of me. It used your tax ID and your business address. My stomach tightened. What happened? It was denied because your bank flagged it as potential fraud. She tapped the application. But the attempt is still on record. I stared at it. They tried to open credit in my name? In the company's name. She corrected herself. But you're the sole proprietor, so legally, it's basically the same thing. I swallowed. If it had gone through, they could have racked up charges that would have become your legal responsibility. I leaned back in my chair. My wife had been sabotaging me for months, while sharing my bed, while telling me she loved me, while quietly forwarding my client list to the man she'd left me for. Ian Whitmore wasn't just her escape plan. He was her business partner in tearing down everything I'd built. So I started building a case. I documented everything, every login, every suspicious activity, every timestamp, every strange access, every piece of evidence I could find. I saved everything. That weekend, I moved out of the house. I didn't fight for it. I didn't argue over furniture. I didn't fight over photo albums or any of the other little things that pile up over 8 years of marriage. I just packed what I needed. Turns out that was a lot less than I'd thought. Then I drove to a furnished apartment near the shop. The divorce paperwork was straightforward because I made it straightforward. Ava got the house. She got the car. She got every decorative thing she'd spent 8 years collecting. I got the business. And I got all the debt attached to it. What she didn't realize was that the business was actually the much better deal. Her lawyer looked at me like I was completely insane for not fighting harder. My lawyer, Joanna, just smiled. I'd met Joanna years earlier through a mutual client. She was a pit bull in a courtroom and exactly the kind of lawyer I wanted on my side. After the signing, Ava and her attorney left the conference room. Joanna waited until the door closed before looking at me. You're giving her exactly what she thinks she wants. I raised an eyebrow. She gets a house with a mortgage she can't afford on her salary alone. Joanna leaned back. And a car payment that's going to eat her alive. She smiled. Meanwhile, you keep the only asset that actually makes money. I nodded. Theo, she wanted the lifestyle. Joanna gave me a knowing look. Now she gets to maintain that lifestyle without your paycheck. She paused. Smart guy. I glanced at the folders on the table. What about the other stuff? The client poaching and the credit fraud attempt? I'm documenting everything. I nodded toward my phone. Ruth ends building a file that's getting thicker every week. Good. Joanna's expression turned serious. Keep at it. She gathered her papers. When you're ready to move, we move together. She looked me straight in the eye. And we move hard. I spent the next 3 months doing exactly that. Every contact between Whitmore's new company and one of my clients went into my records. Every suspicious access to my systems before I changed all the passwords I documented. Every piece of evidence showing that Ava had been helping Ian, I saved. And I kept everything in triplicate. Digital copies. Printed copies. Copies on a separate hard drive. Meanwhile, I still had a business to run. And employees who were counting on me to make sure their paychecks arrived every week. That's when Hector stepped up in ways I hadn't seen from him before. He took over all the scheduling so I could focus on keeping clients and dealing with the damage. He trained 2 new techs who actually showed up on time and didn't act like doing their jobs was some personal favor to me. He even started coming in on Saturdays. He'd sit with me for hours while we rebuilt the client database from scratch. This time, we added better security, better passwords, and passwords that weren't my wedding anniversary. One evening, we were both still at the shop after 9. I looked over at Hector. You're working too hard. He didn't even look up. I'm Cuban. He kept working. We don't know how to work any other way. Then he smiled. It's in the blood. My grandfather worked until he was 87, Hector said. He fell off a ladder while installing a ceiling fan, and 2 weeks later, he was back at work with a cast on his arm. He handed me a container of rice and beans. His wife, Rosa, sent this. She'd been feeding me regularly ever since she'd heard what happened with Ava. Every container came with a handwritten note telling me I needed to eat more and reminding me that certain women weren't worth the trouble. Hector leaned back. Besides, I don't like people who steal. It's personal now. I looked at him. How's it personal for you? My brother-in-law ran off with my sister's savings and his business partner's wife back in '98. He shook his head. Same kind of snake. All teeth and no soul. What happened? The whole family spent 5 years cleaning up that mess, while he was living it up in Florida like he'd won something. I looked at him. What happened to him? Hector smiled. Lives in a studio apartment in Tampa now. Sells used cars to tourists who don't know any better. He shrugged. My sister owns a construction company. She bought her 3rd rental property last year. I smiled. What does she say to him? Nothing. He laughed. She sends him a Christmas card every December. Just a picture of her newest house. No note. Nope. Nothing. He nodded. Just the picture. I leaned back. I like that. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I got a text from an unknown number. Turned out to be Sloan, Ava's best friend since freshman year of college. 15 years of friendship. Roommates after graduation. Bridesmaids at each other's weddings. The whole deal. The message said, "Heard you're single now." Then another message came through. Also heard my best friend is a fraud. Like actually a fraud. Can we talk? That last part got my attention. We met at a diner near the hospital where she worked as an ER nurse. She was already sitting in a booth when I arrived. She looked like she hadn't slept properly in weeks. Before I could even ask why she'd contacted me, she held up a hand. Before you ask why I'm here, just let me explain. I sat down. Ava called me 3 days before she left. She took a breath. You told me everything. She wanted me to be happy for her. Sloan shook her head. She actually expected me to celebrate. I stared at her. She asked if she could store some boxes at my place, so you wouldn't find them before she was ready to bounce. What did you tell her? I told her she was making the worst mistake of her life. Her expression hardened. And that what she was doing was disgusting. She looked down at the table for a moment. She was betraying someone who'd never been anything but good to her. Then she looked back at me. We haven't talked since. 15 years of friendship, and she cut me off because I wouldn't cheer for her betraying a good guy. Sloan reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. But here's why I'm actually here. She unlocked the screen. She sent me texts after that conversation. What kind of texts? Detailed ones. She turned the phone toward me. About the business plan, the timeline, how Ian was going to use your systems and your client database. My stomach tightened. She was so proud of herself. She couldn't stop bragging about how clever the two of them were being. She scrolled through the messages. I screenshotted everything before she blocked me. Then she slid the phone across the table. The messages went back 5 months before Ava left me. There were discussions about restructuring the client pipeline, leveraging Nolan's operational framework, building on my foundation without having to carry my overhead. I stared at the screen. Why are you giving me this? Sloan looked at me. Because I spent 15 years thinking I knew who she was. She shook her head. Turns out I was friends with someone pretending to be a person. She paused. And I don't like being played. I forwarded the screenshots to Joanna that night. She called them extremely useful for establishing premeditation and intent. After that, Sloan and I kept in touch. It wasn't romantic at first. Not even close. We were just two people who'd both been burned by the same person, and somehow found some comfort in comparing notes. She'd text me whenever Ava posted something annoying on social media. I'd text her whenever the case documentation hit another milestone. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into something more. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was actually looking forward to seeing her. Sloan didn't want to fix me. She didn't want to change me. She didn't want to turn me into someone I wasn't. She just wanted someone who showed up when he said he would and told the truth, even when the truth wasn't comfortable. One night, we were eating Thai food at her apartment when she looked across the table at me. You know she's going to lose it when she finds out we're together. I smiled. Ava's going to see this as the ultimate betrayal. She shook her head. Worse than me refusing to help hide her boxes. I raised an eyebrow. You giving me evidence of her fraud wasn't the ultimate betrayal? Nah. Sloan took another bite. That was justice. Then she pointed between the two of us. This is personal. She looked at me seriously. She's never going to forgive either of us. Can you live with that? I didn't hesitate. Been living with it since she asked me to help her lie to you. Sloan nodded slowly. Some friendships need to end. She reached over and grabbed a spring roll from my plate. Besides, you're better company than she ever was. 6 months after the divorce, I got a phone call that changed everything. It was Donnie Briggs. The same client Ian had tried to poach with that 15% discount back at the beginning. The same client I'd convinced to stay with me by matching the price and adding extended emergency coverage. Nolan, you need to come to my office right now. Donnie sounded serious. And bring that lawyer of yours if she's available. I didn't waste any time. I called Joanna, and the two of us drove straight to Donnie's main dealership. He was waiting for us in his office. There was a stack of folders spread across his desk, and he had a look on his face I'd never seen before. Donnie was usually all smiles, handshakes, and golf jokes. This was different. 6 months ago, I almost signed with Whitmore Commercial Services, he said. You remember that? I remember. You also remember that 3 of my competitors in this market actually did sign with them. I nodded. Guys I've known for 20 years. We share vendor contacts. We talk at chamber meetings. We've referred customers to each other forever. I remember. I looked at him. Biggest mistake any of them ever made. Donnie slid the folders across his desk. Take a look. I opened the first folder. It was filled with invoices and service records. There were service calls for work that had never happened. Parts charges for equipment that had never been installed. Labor hours that didn't match any actual technician visits in Whitmore's own dispatch records. He's been billing them for work that never got done, Donnie said. Service calls that never happened. Parts that were never replaced. He pulled out another set of papers. One of my buddies runs a restaurant supply company across town. His invoices showed monthly filter changes on units that hadn't been touched in 6 months. I looked up. How'd he figure it out? His walk-in freezer died completely. Donnie shook his head. When another company's repair guy came out, he found the original filter still sitting there. He held up his hand. Covered in dust. Never changed. Never changed. He tapped the invoices. Not once. Even though he'd been billed 6 times for monthly filter changes. I flipped through the pages. The scope of it was insane. How much are we talking? Just from the 3 guys I know personally? Donnie leaned back. Over 50 grand in overbilling across 6 months. He paused. And that's only what they've been able to catch and prove. Joanna leaned forward. Are these business owners willing to put this in writing? She glanced at Donnie. Sign affidavits? More than willing. His expression hardened. They're furious. Donnie pulled another folder from the stack. But here's where it gets really interesting. He opened it. I started asking around, talking to other business owners who switched to Whitmore because of his discount offers. He shook his head. Same story everywhere. Phantom service calls. Insane parts charges. Huge markups. Work that never actually happened. I stared at him. How many businesses total? At least 12 that I've talked to so far. He paused. Probably more who haven't figured out they're being scammed yet because they haven't had equipment failures that exposed it. I looked back down at the invoices. Something about them felt familiar. The formatting. The service codes. The way everything was documented. I knew exactly why. They're mine. Donnie looked at me. What? The formatting. The service codes. I pointed at the paperwork. They're mine. I looked at the invoices again. Ian didn't just steal my clients. My voice got quieter. He stole my invoice templates, my documentation system, my entire way of doing things. And Ava had given him access to all of it. One more thing, Donnie said. He pulled out one final document. This is a copy of Whitmore Commercial Services LLC registration from the state. He turned it toward us. Look at the listed members. I looked down. There were 2 registered members. Ian Whitmore, managing member, and Ava Cole, 20% equity partner. I froze. Not Ava Whitmore. Not even her maiden name. Ava Cole. She was still legally Ava Cole when the company had been formed. When was this filed? Joanna asked. 3 months before she left him. Joanna's eyes narrowed. She was a founding partner of this company while she was still married to Nolan. Donnie nodded. While she was still living in his house. 3 months of planning. Joanna's voice became sharp. This is organized fraud. She looked at the paperwork again. Wire fraud potentially, given the electronic transfers. Then she pointed to Ava's name on the LLC registration. And with her name on the LLC, she's personally liable for all of it. Not just as someone who helped them, but as an owner and founding partner. Joanna looked at me. What do you want to do? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked at Donnie. How many of those businesses would be willing to come forward? I looked at the folders. Put everything in writing? I paused. Testify if it comes to that? Donnie didn't hesitate. I'll make calls tonight. He nodded firmly. We coordinate and file together. Then he looked at me. More people, more power. That night, I sat in my apartment with the folders spread all over my kitchen table. I kept staring at them. She'd looked me in the eyes for months while secretly putting together everything she needed to bury me. Building a fraud case takes time, patience, documentation. That's exactly what we did. Joanna brought in a forensic accountant named Wei. He spent an entire month going through every invoice Whitmore Commercial Services had ever sent. The guy built spreadsheets that looked like modern art. And somehow, he found patterns nobody else would have noticed. Across all 12 businesses that came forward, the pattern was identical. Billing for services that never happened. Parts markups of 200% on things that cost them a third of what they charged. Labor charges for technicians who weren't even employed by the company on the dates listed. The total documented fraud came to just under $350,000 across 18 months of operation. And that was only from the businesses willing to testify. Wei figured the real number was probably closer to $500,000. Then there was the screenshot Sloan had given me. It added another layer to everything. The text messages proved Ava knew exactly what she and Ian were doing months before she left. The timestamps showed she'd been planning the client theft while she was still married to me. Joanna explained that the screenshots changed everything. It's the difference between saying maybe they made some honest mistakes and proving they absolutely knew this was fraud and planned it. When we laid out Wei's findings, Joanna looked over everything carefully. This is enough for a serious civil suit, she said. Then she leaned back. But if you want the really satisfying result, we need to get the state involved. She tapped the paperwork. Fraud at this level gets attention. What can they do that we can't? They've got subpoena power we don't. She started listing it off. They can dig into bank records. They can force people to answer questions under oath. They can make life very uncomfortable for people who thought they were being clever. I looked at her. Do it. She did. Joanna made the calls, filed the paperwork, and got everything moving. Then, nothing happened. For 6 weeks. The state's fraud division was backed up with cases from some major insurance scam that had been all over the news earlier that year. Our file was sitting in line behind 30 others. Joanna called every week for an update. Every time she got the same answer. It's under review. We'll be in touch. These things take time. Meanwhile, one of the 12 business owners started getting cold feet. His name was Santos. He ran 3 dry cleaning locations and had been one of the loudest voices early on, especially when he was talking about how Ian had ripped him off for $8,000. I called him to check in. I can't afford to get tied up in depositions and court dates for the next 2 years, Santos told me. I've got 3 locations to run. If this drags on, I'm the one losing money sitting around in waiting rooms. You already lost money. I kept my voice calm. Ian took $8,000 from you. That money's gone. Santos didn't say anything. You can't get it back by burning another 20 grand in legal fees and wasting your time. He eventually pulled his statement. Donnie wasn't willing to let that happen. He spent an entire week talking Santos back into it. It took 3 dinners, a lot of convincing, and promises from the other business owners that they'd cover any legal costs Santos couldn't handle. Eventually, Santos agreed to stay involved. The state finally got moving in month 4. They assigned an investigator and started pulling records. Meanwhile, I had my own thing going. Hector and I started reaching out to every former client who had left for Whitmore during the previous 2 years. We weren't trying to pressure them. We just checked in, asked how their equipment was running, offered to answer any questions they had. Because when people are getting ripped off, they eventually notice. Sometimes they can't immediately put their finger on what's wrong. But something feels off. The bills seem too high. The equipment keeps breaking. And somehow, they're supposedly getting regular maintenance every single month. The problem was, they didn't have anyone to compare notes with. We gave them that comparison. By month 8, 4 former clients had come back. By month 10, 7. By month 12, 11. And every single one had a story. Equipment failures, billing problems, service calls that never actually happened. Every one of them signed a statement for Joanna's growing file. One guy who ran a chain of laundromats told me his dryer vents hadn't been cleaned in 18 months. That wouldn't have been so bad if he hadn't been receiving monthly invoices for the service. It was a serious fire hazard. Someone could have been killed. He was so furious that he offered to testify twice if it would help. Ian, meanwhile, was getting cocky. He started posting all over social media about his rapidly growing commercial services empire. He bought a new car, put a down payment on a house in a gated community. Then he proposed to Ava, and Ava made sure everyone knew about it. She photographed the engagement ring from about 6 different angles and posted the pictures online. One morning, Hector walked into my office holding his phone. "You see this?" I looked at the screen. It was their engagement announcement. The caption read, "Finally finding my person after years of settling." "Settling?" Hector said, disgust written all over his face. "She called 8 years with you settling." He shook his head. "Like she was just holding your spot until something better came along." I stared at the screen for a moment. Hector sighed. "Rosa wants me to tell you she's praying for karma to speed up." I smiled. "Tell Rosa I appreciate that." Hector nodded. "She also wanted me to tell you she knows someone at the county clerk's office who could make certain permit applications real complicated for certain businesses." I looked at him. "Probably not legal." "Nope." He shrugged. "She said justice and what's legal aren't always the same thing." I laughed. "I married a woman with strong opinions." Hector grinned. "They thought they'd won." I thought about that for a long time. Then I thought about patience. The notification finally came on a Tuesday morning in spring. It had been 1 year and 6 months since Ava walked out of our house with those matching suitcases. My phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Joanna. "It's happening." I sat up in bed. "What?" "The state opened an official investigation." I didn't say anything. "Ian and Ava are both named." She continued. "Subpoenas are going out this week." 18 months. I'd waited 18 months for that call. "What's the timeline?" "Investigations take a while." She sounded almost amused by the question. "Interviews, document review, building the formal case." She paused. "But the fraud amount is big enough that this isn't just civil anymore." My stomach tightened. "If the evidence holds, and it will, we're looking at criminal charges." "What do I need to do?" "Nothing." She laughed softly. "That's the beautiful part. You built the case. You got the witnesses lined up. Now the system does its thing." She paused. "You just keep your head down and wait." So that's what I did. I waited. And I watched. The first crack showed up 3 days after Ian and Ava received the investigation notice. Whitmore Commercial Services website went dark. Their main phone number started going straight to voicemail. And the service vans that used to drive around town with Ian's face plastered all over them, they started disappearing from the roads. I drove past his office once. The parking lot that used to have 6 vans lined up neatly now had 2. One had a flat tire. The other had a for sale sign sitting in the window. Donnie kept calling me with updates. Over the past year, he'd kind of become a friend. His clients are jumping ship, he told me. Word got out about the investigation. Nobody wants their name connected to a fraud case. He paused. His new contracts are getting canceled left and right. Existing clients are demanding audits of every single invoice. How's he handling it? Not great. Donnie laughed bitterly. He showed up at one of the other guys' offices yesterday and started yelling about conspiracies. Said someone was sabotaging him. What happened? He had to be walked out by security. Donnie paused. The building manager told him he'd call the cops if Ian came back. 2 weeks after that, Ava called me. It was the first time she'd reached out since the divorce had been finalized. I let it ring. She called again. I let it ring again. The third time, she left a voicemail. Nolan, I know you're behind this. Somehow. Her voice was shaky. And I know Sloan helped you. My own best friend turned on me for you. She started crying. 15 years of friendship. And she stabbed me in the back. There was a long pause. You need to make this stop. Please. I'm begging you. Her voice cracked. Everything is falling apart. Ian's losing it. The investigators are calling my work. My boss is asking questions. Then she said the words I'd been waiting to hear. You've got to call this off. I saved the voicemail for documentation. Joanna said it might come in handy. Then I deleted Ava's contact information entirely. Not for the case. For my own peace of mind. 2 days later, Ian showed up at my shop. He looked like a man who hadn't had a decent night's sleep in days. He walked through my front door like he owned the place. 2 of my techs were sitting at the counter. They stopped what they were doing and watched him. Hector immediately moved to cut him off. I held up a hand. Let the guy dig his own hole. Ian looked straight at me. You think you're clever. His voice was too loud for the room. You think you've outsmarted me. He stepped forward. But I know what you're doing. I stayed seated behind my desk. Working with those other businesses. Feeding information to the investigators. Trying to destroy everything I built. I kept my voice level. What you built? I leaned back. You built it with my client list, my invoice templates, and my entire system. I paused. The ones my wife stole. Ian's face tightened. Ava and I are partners. Equal partners. He pointed at me. She had every right to bring her expertise to our company. I looked at him. Her expertise was being married to me. I let that sink in. That doesn't transfer. His face went red. He took a step toward my desk. One of my techs, a guy named Ruiz, stood up from his chair. He didn't say anything. He just stood there. Ian noticed. This isn't over. He pointed at me. I've got lawyers. I've got resources. His voice rose again. You think some small-time HVAC guy can take me down? I didn't even move. I don't have to take you down, Ian. I looked him straight in the eye. You already did that yourself. I tapped the folders on my desk. I just wrote it all down. Ian stared at me for a few seconds. Then he turned around and left without another word. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the window. Ian's case dragged on for months. That's how this stuff actually works. It's not some dramatic courtroom scene every day. It's paperwork, depositions, delays, lawyers billing hours while the evidence keeps stacking up. The forensic accountant testified and walked the court through every fraudulent invoice, every fake service call, and every inflated charge. He used charts and graphs that made the whole thing almost impossible to deny. The documented fraud totaled $347,000 across 12 victim businesses. At one point, we put up an invoice showing an $800 charge for a capacitor that retailed for around $45. Ian's lawyer objected. The judge overruled him. Donnie testified. 3 other business owners testified too. They talked about having their trust broken. About money they would probably never see again. About realizing they'd been played by someone who smiled at them while picking their pockets. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. The evidence did the talking for me. Ian's lawyer tried a different argument. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. He said Ian was inexperienced in the business. He argued that Ian was a real estate guy who didn't really understand how HVAC operations worked. According to him, the billing problems were honest mistakes, not intentional fraud. Nobody bought it. The state hit Ian with fraud and theft charges. Multiple counts. The kind of charges that start adding up when you've been running the same scam on 12 businesses for a year and a half. First, Ian tried to fight it. He demanded a trial. Then, apparently, his lawyer explained what happens when you walk into a trial with overwhelming evidence stacked against you. The plea deal he eventually took wasn't generous. But it was better than what the judge could have given him if he'd gone to trial and lost. He got real prison time. Not decades, but enough to matter. Enough to sit in a cell and think about all those clever moves that had gotten him there. On top of that, he got supervised release afterward. And restitution he'd be paying off for years. He also lost the right to ever run a licensed business in the state again. His fancy house went into foreclosure while he was waiting for sentencing. The car got repossessed. And the engagement ring he'd used to propose to Ava was returned for whatever fraction of the original price the jeweler was willing to give them. Ava took a plea deal too. Her lawyer convinced her that fighting the charges would only make things worse. A jury wasn't going to be particularly sympathetic to a woman who helped rip off local businesses while cheating on her husband. She got probation, community service, and a restitution order that would follow her for years. The interior design business she'd been building during our marriage fell apart too. Potential clients started Googling her name, and when they did, they found the court records. I heard through Sloan that Ava tried to start over using her maiden name. It didn't work. Someone in the local design community recognized her at a trade show and made sure everyone there knew who she really was. Small industries have long memories. And then there was the house. The same house she'd demanded in the divorce. The house she thought was going to be her ticket to freedom from me. The mortgage was in her name alone. I'd made absolutely sure of that during the settlement. She couldn't afford it on what she was making, and whatever money Ian had left had disappeared into legal fees and frozen accounts. She missed 3 payments in 4 months. Then, the week after Ian's sentencing, she put the house on the market. She listed it for 25% less than what we'd originally paid. Still couldn't find a buyer. Foreclosure properties were flooding the market, and nobody wanted to pay full price for someone else's desperation. One morning, Hector walked into my office holding the listing printout with a grin on his face. "Same house," he said. He tapped the page. "Underwater by at least 30 grand. Then he smiled. "There's justice in the world after all. I didn't buy the house back. I didn't want it. I didn't need the satisfaction of owning something from a past I'd already left behind." The business, on the other hand, took off. It doubled in the year after Ian's conviction. Not because I found some secret formula. Not because I suddenly became a genius businessman. I just showed up. I did the work. And I treated people like they mattered. Former clients came back because they knew I wasn't going to cheat them. New clients came through referrals. Donnie alone sent me 3 new referrals in the first 6 months. We grew to 24 employees. Added 4 more vans to the fleet. And eventually moved into a bigger facility with actual office space instead of a converted closet. Somewhere along the way, Sloan and I got engaged. Hector gave a toast at the engagement party. He talked about stubborn people, about playing the long game, and about how the best revenge is building something that lasts. A month after our engagement, Ava texted me from yet another new number. I stared at the message. "I hope you're happy." Then another one came through. "You ruined everything. You took my business, my reputation, and my best friend. I'll never forgive either of you for this." I looked at that message for a long time. I thought about everything I could say, all the things I could point out. I could have reminded her that she'd ruined her own life. I could have listed every choice she'd made, every lie, every betrayal, every decision that had brought her to that point. I could have gotten a lot of satisfaction out of it. Instead, I typed 3 words. "You're welcome." Then goodbye. And that was it. Some people spend their whole lives wondering what revenge is supposed to look like. I figured out that revenge doesn't always mean destroying the people who tried to destroy you. Sometimes it looks like building something that lasts. Something so solid that the people who tried to tear you down can only watch from whatever distance their own choices have put between you. And honestly, that's better. Anyway, guys, we're getting really close to hitting 2,000 subscribers on this channel. If you're not subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It really helps us reach that 2,000 mark. Thanks for being here and for helping make this dream come true.